But the Negro is necessary. Well, he's unnecessary to me, so he must be necessary to you. I'll give you your problem back. You're the nigger, baby. He isn't me.
I read about it in the paper, in the subway on my way to work. I read it, and I couldn't believe it. And I read it again. Then perhaps I just stared at it, at the newsprint spelling out his name, spelling out the story. I stared at it in the swinging lights of the subway car, and in the faces and bodies of the people, and in my own face, trapped in the darkness which roared outside. It was not to be believed, and I kept telling myself that as I walked from the subway station to the high school, and at the same time I couldn't doubt it, I was scarred. I was scared for Sonny. He became real to me again. A great block of ice got settled in my belly and kept melting there slowly all day long while I taught my classes algebra. It was a special kind of ice. It kept melting, sending trickles of ice water all up and down my veins, but it never got less. Sometimes it hardened and seemed to expand until I felt my guts were going to come spilling out, or that I was going to choke or scream. This would always be at a moment when I was remembering some specific thing Sonny had once said or done. When he was about as old as the boys in my classes, his face had been bright and open. There was a lot of copper in it, and he had wonderfully direct brown eyes and great gentleness and privacy. I wondered what he looked like now. He had been picked up the evening before in a raid on an apartment downtown for peddling and using heroin. I couldn't believe it, but what I mean by that is that I couldn't find any room for it anywhere inside me. I had kept it outside me for a long time. I hadn't wanted to know. I had suspicions, but I didn't name them. I kept putting them away. I told myself that Sonny was wild, but he wasn't crazy, and he always had been a good boy. He hadn't ever turned hard or evil or disrespectful the way kids can, so quick, especially in Harlem. I didn't want to believe that I'd ever see my brother going down, coming to nothing, all that light in his face going out, but in the condition I had already seen so many others. Yet it had happened, and here I was, talking about algebra to a lot of boys who might, every one of them for all I knew, be popping off needles every time they went to the head. Maybe it did more for them than algebra could. I was sure that the first time Sonny had ever had horse, he couldn't have been much older than the boys were now. These boys now were living as we'd been living then. They were growing up in a rush, and their heads bumped abruptly against the low ceiling of their actual possibilities. They were filled with rage. All they really knew were two darknesses. The darkness of their lives, which was now closing in on them, and the darkness of the movies, which had blinded them to that other darkness, and in which they now vindictively dreamed, and once more together than they were at any other time, and more alone. When the last bell rang, the last class ended. I let out my breath. It seemed I'd been holding it in for all that time. My clothes were wet. I may have looked as though I'd been sitting in a steam bath, all dressed up, all afternoon. I sat alone in the classroom a long time. I listened to the boys outside, downstairs, shouting and cursing and laughing. Their laughter struck me for perhaps the first time. It was not the joyous laughter which, God knows why.
Oggetto d'arte. E io sono molto caro.
My clothes were wet. I may have looked as though I'd been sitting in a steam bath, all dressed up, all afternoon. I sat alone in the classroom a long time. I listened to the boys outside, downstairs, shouting and cursing and laughing. Their laughter struck me for perhaps the first time. It was not the joyous laughter which, God knows why, one associates with.
green?
I have been ill all summer, Excellency. It isn't art.
What is your name?
Michelangelo de Caravaggio.
Children. It was mocking and insular, its intent to denigrate. It was disenchanted, and in this also lay the authority of their curses. Perhaps I was listening to them because I was thinking about my brother, and in them I heard my brother and myself. One boy was whistling a tune at once very complicated and very simple. It seemed to be pouring out of him as though he were a bird, and it sounded very cool and moving through all that harsh, bright air, only just holding its own through all those other sounds. I stood up and walked over to the window and looked down into the courtyard. It was the beginning of the spring, and the sap was rising in the boys. A teacher passed through them every now and again, quickly, as though he or she couldn't wait to get out of that courtyard, to get those boys out of their sight and off their minds.
My friends. Only understand neglected gangsters who found luxury on slum shit.
What are you going to do, he asked me. I mean, about Sonny. Look, I haven't seen Sonny for over a year. I'm not sure how I'm going to do anything. Anyway, what the hell can I do? That's right, he said quickly. Ain't nothing you can do. Ain't much help no old Sonny no more, I guess. It was what I was thinking, and so it seemed to me he had no right to say it. I'm surprised at Sonny, he went on. He had a funny way of talking. He looked straight ahead as though he were talking to himself. I thought Sonny was a smart boy. I thought he was too smart to get hung. I guess he thought so too, he said sharply. And that's how he got hung. And how about you? You're pretty goddamn smart, I bet. Then he looked directly at me, just for a minute. If I was smart, I had reached for a pistol a long time ago. Look, don't tell me your sad story. If it was up to me, I'd give you one. Then I felt guilty. Guilty, probably for never having supposed that the poor bastard had a story of his own, much less a sad one. And I asked quickly, what's going to happen to him now? He didn't answer this. He was off by himself someplace. Funny thing, he said, and from his tone, we might have been discussing the quickest way to get to Brooklyn. When I saw the papers this morning, the first thing I asked myself was if I had anything to do with it. I sort of felt responsible. I began to listen more carefully. The subway station was on the corner, just before us, and I stopped. He stopped too. We were in the front of a bar, and he ducked slightly, peering in, but whoever he was looking for didn't seem to be there. The jukebox was blasting away with some black and bouncy, and I half watched the barmaid as she danced her way from the jukebox to her place behind the bar. I watched her face as she laughingly responded to something said to her, still keeping time to the music. When she smiled, one saw the little girl, one sensed the doomed, still struggling woman beneath the battered face of the semi-whore. "I never give Sonny nothing," the boy said finally. "But a long time ago I come to high school, and Sonny asked me how I felt." He paused. I couldn't bear to watch him. I watched the barmaid, and I listened to the music which seemed to be causing the pavement to shake. I told him it felt great. The music stopped. The barmaid paused and watched the jukebox until the music began again. It did. All this was carrying me someplace I didn't want to go. I certainly didn't want to know how it felt. It filled everything. The people, the houses, the music, the dark quicksilver barmaid with menace. And this menace was their reality. "What's going to happen to him now?" I asked again. "They'll send him away someplace and they'll try to cure him." He shook his head. "Maybe he'll even think he's kicked the habit. Then they'll let him loose." He gestured, throwing his cigarette into the gutter. "That's all." "What do you mean, that's all?" But I knew what he meant. "I mean, that's all." He turned his head and looked at me, pulling down the corners of his mouth. "Don't you know what I mean?" he asked softly. "How the hell would I know what you mean?" I almost whispered.
Getting the gun. That cure ourselves, you know. Like young men, groomed up, and walking around here, we groomed up, smelling nice, looking nice.
It. I don't know why. "That's right," he said to the air. "How would he know what I mean?" He turned toward me again, patient and calm, and yet I somehow felt him shaking as though he were going to fall apart. I felt that ice in my guts again, the dread I'd felt all afternoon. And again I watched the barmaid moving about the bar, washing glasses and singing. "Listen, they'll let him out, and then it'll just start all over again. That's what I mean." "You mean they'll let him out? And then he'll just start working his way back in again? You mean he'll never kick the habit? Is that what you mean?" "That's right," he said cheerfully. "You see what I mean." "Tell me," I said at last, "why does he want to die?" "He must want to die. He's killing himself, especially in Harlem. Why does he want to die?" I didn't want to believe that I'd ever see my brother going down, coming to nothing. He licked his lips, all to the head. "He don't want to die. Maybe it did more for them than algebra could. Don't nobody want to die ever." I was sure that the first time Sonny had ever had a horse, I wanted to ask him. He told many things and walked over to the window and looked down into the courtyard. I could not have borne the answers. It was the beginning of the spring, and the sap was rising in the boards. None of my business. The teacher passed through them every now and again. On old Sonny, he had no right to say it. We reached the subway station. Sonny, "This is your station?" he asked. He went on. I nodded. "Sonny, nothing," the boy said finally. I took one step down. "Damn, but a long time ago I come to high school." I looked up at him, and Sonny asked me how I felt. He paused. "Damn it, if I didn't leave all my money home." "I mean, that's all." Have you? Just for a couple of days, and looked at me, pulling down the corners of his mouth. Gave and threatened to come pouring out of me. "Don't you know what I mean?" he asked. I didn't hate him anymore. How I felt that in another moment. They'll let him out. I start crying like a child. Then it'll just start all over again. That's what I mean. Sure, they'll let him out, and then he'll just start working his way back in again. I looked at my wallet and didn't have a dollar. You mean he'll never kick the habit? Is that what I said? That hold you? He didn't look at it. He didn't want to look at it. A terrible closed look came over his face, as though he were keeping the number of the bill a secret from him and me. "Thanks," he said. And now he was dying to see me go. "Don't worry about Sonny. I'll write him or something." "Sure," I said. "You do that." so long. You see.
And they rely so long. What white people have to do is try to find out in their own hearts why it was necessary to have a nigger in the first place. Because I'm not a nigger. I'm a man. But if you think I'm a nigger, it means you need it. The question you got to ask yourself, the white population of this country has got to ask itself, if I'm not the nigger here, and you invented him, you, the white people, invented him, then you got to find out why.
Yeah. I was getting out of here. I didn't so much go to Paris as leave New York. And the reason I left New York was because I knew that one fine Tuesday, somebody's going to call me nigger just once too often, and somebody was going to die. And I didn't care which one of us it was. So I split. I didn't know what was going to happen to me in Paris, but I knew what was going to happen to me here. I grew up in Paris in a way, and then I came back. In a sense, one could say that my life in Paris prepared me to go south. Because I would never have gone south if I'd stayed here. I wouldn't have been, if I stayed alive, I'd have been a junkie or a prisoner. I'd have been in no state to go to Montgomery, Alabama. You never went anywhere. You never went anywhere. People's attitudes don't change because the law changes. I know that. And the homosexual question is like what we call the racial question. Nobody, no man and no woman, is precisely what they think they are. Love is where you find it. It's not in the province of the law. It's nothing to do with the church. And if you lie about that, you lie about everything. The boy is in the middle. It's not so much about homosexuality at all. It's about what happens to you if you can't love anybody. It doesn't make any difference whether you can't love a woman, can't love a man. If you can't love anybody, you're dangerous. Because you have no way of learning humility. No way of learning that other people suffer.
Maybe you can talk at night, can't sleep, I'm crying in the dark. I'm gonna keep it simple, cause you bitches dumb. Every time we pull up, you bitches run. I'm from the Blue Jay gang.